everyone. Welcome to another episode of By Design, where we believe business should be run by design and not left to chance. I've got my good friend and founder of Tested HQ, Michael D'Onofrio, in the hot seat today, and I'm excited to talk to him about his journey from taking Tested HQ from a side hustle and growing it and scaling it and running that company. We're going to get into all the good things, the bad things, the challenges, the fun of his journey. So, Michael, first of all, thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy man, but glad to have you here today.
Yeah, really excited to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So walk us through, again, I know you started Tested HQ. It was kind of a side hustle way back in the day, and now it's a fully run organization. Maybe just walk me through that journey of how that came about. What made you take the leap?
Yeah, so Test HQ kind of came about through a bit of a winding path. I graduated undergrad with a degree in psychology, wanted to do business, wasn't sure what that would look like. Ended up working in construction for a year just to kind of make some money in the meantime.
As most psychology majors do.
There you go. Yeah, you'll find that I don't really follow the norms for the most part of my life. But ended up getting picked up by one of the largest consumer product manufacturers in the world, a company called Tektronic Industries. You'll know them as brands like Ryobi, Rigid, and Milwaukee inside of Home Depot. That's where I kind of fell in love with the product development process in the hardware industry, working with tools, anything you sell on a Home Depot shelf. So I got into product development, got to see a product and be in charge of a product going from a drawing on a piece of paper all the way to actually being on the shelf and sold to end users. And throughout that process and many years of working in product development at a couple different tool companies, I just realized that a lot of these larger corporations are not agile enough to get feedback from their actual end user during the product development process in order to make decisions that will help them sell more products on the shelf once that product is ready to go to manufacture. So it started out as a side hustle. It kind of came out as inspiration from the Clemson MBA entrepreneur program. I went into that program with the idea that I want to be an entrepreneur, not necessarily with the idea of Tested HQ, but through that program and talking with the professors, I kind of was able to learn and figure out that there was an opportunity here. It was something I was doing in a corporate setting, but one of my professors basically challenged me and said, hey, what you're doing for one company, could you do for many companies? And that basically, I took it through Clemson's enterprise pitch competition, won a little bit of money, and then actually went back to work in corporate America because I wanted benefits and a salary. But really just continuing to see that problem in my corporate life, I was like, I got to do it. So it started out as a side hustle in 2020, which worked out because COVID happened and lockdowns happened, so I could work at home and have 2 jobs I was doing. But then I kind of one of the people I worked with at my current role left to go to a different company, and he gave me a call in October of 2020 and said, hey, we were friends. He's like, I know what you're doing on the side. Could you do it for this company I'm at? And I said, yeah. I was like, and I wrote a number on the contract that I thought he'd never say yes to. And then he literally that night was like, yeah, let's go. I'm like, all right, well, now I have a choice. So yeah, left the corporate life and started Test HQ full time, really focused on getting product development teams as close to the end users as possible during that product development process. So major multi-million-dollar decisions could be made based on end user sentiments that will help them sell more product on the shelf.
Nice. So let's get into the fun part. So you have this wonderful idea, and now I'm sure just like when I started By Design, you think you're going to take over the world from day one. Because you get the client, you're like, you priced it, and they'll never do it. Then they do it. You're like, well, this is easy. I'm going to get 1 million more. Take me through the growth. So it started. It sounds like it was you and your partner started it off, and then you grew up to what? You had 10, 12 people at one point.
Yeah, we got up to 12 people. I mean, it was just me to start, and then I didn't even know I needed a co-founder. I had heard through that Clemson MBA because we got to experience Y Combinator pitches and things like that and learn a lot about just the founding process. And Y Combinator, for example, one of the most prestigious incubators in the United States, you have to have a co-founder. They literally do not let you apply unless you have a co-founder. And I never thought of a need for that, and I didn't know. I had thought of some people, hey, who could help me co-found this? But Austin kind of came to me by accident. I was asked to be a guest lecturer for a Clemson MBA, the corporate program, night class. And Austin always tells me that was the one glass he's glad he didn't sleep through, because it was all virtual. And so at the end, I gave my spiel about, it was really about innovation in corporate America, which was my background previously to Tested HQ. And at the end of that presentation, I mentioned kind of what I was doing next. And Austin had my number because we had worked together at TTI years before that. Gave me a call and he's like, "Hey man, I want to help you." I said, "I don't have any money to give you. I'm not even paying myself." He's like, "No, I just want to help you." So he just started working. I mean, he wrote the business plan without me asking. He made the website because my website I made sucks. So yeah, and about 2 months later, he came on part-time, and then the following June, he jumped and joined me full-time. And we grew really quickly. I mean, I didn't realize how big of a need there was. I knew there was somewhat of a need in starting the business, and I felt like it was possible, especially for smaller hardware companies that don't necessarily have the resources of a TTI or Stanley Black & Decker or something like that. But even those big companies started reaching out, and the conversation started. So yeah, we grew very quickly, too quickly, some might say, to 10, 12 employees, and kind of just entered a new world of running a business at that point.
Nice. And we're going to get into the people part, because for anybody that listens, they know that's where my passion lies, is always in the people. But I want to go back a little bit to the co-founder strategy. We had Paul Calley on a recent episode, and he was talking about founder strategy. And he said his magic number, and the number he always heard, is you should have 3 founders, which I thought was brilliant for the simple fact. And I asked him why. And I was thinking it was going to be some deep, reason. It's simply so when you make a decision, it's always 3-0 or 2-1. If you have an even number, 2 or 4, you can get ties. You can get, well, we'll team up against these 2. He goes, with 3, you can't really do that, right? Like, you get 3 diverse people with backgrounds, and you're more than likely going to come up with the right answer the majority of the time when you have 3. And I was like, wow, that's kind of brilliant to have 3 folks. And at By Design, we have 3 folks. Didn't realize, I don't know if we did it by design to start, but it definitely works out. So talk a little bit, though, before we get into the people, about that. So you're a single solopreneur is what how is that? Like, how did you make decisions? Who do you kick ideas off of? Do you have anybody that you can even...
At the time, I relied heavily on my network, and I still do that. Even when because we did get up to a point where I would consider we had 3 founders. We had Austin and I for the majority of the time, but we had one of the 12 that we hired was, I think he was our 4th hire overall. He quickly kind of rose to the top, and even when, things changed in a very dynamic business environment, he ended up, sticking with us, and we ended up just treating him as leadership with us, basically. And I ran every decision by the 2 of them, which I really liked that dynamic, because we had I was lucky with Austin, and Austin was a completely complementary personality to me. Like, we were opposites in all the right ways. So I am very dynamic, very sales oriented, very people oriented. Austin, he's an engineer by training. So like, he's very process driven, procedure driven, but also like he's more financial driven in a sense than I am. Whatever we have to do to get a customer, we'll do, right? Mm-hmm. Austin's more like, no, like, we need to draw a line here. We need to do that. So we always, in 5 years of doing business together, we actually wrote in our operating agreement, that we were 50-50 on decisions. We had a tiebreaker that was like an independent arbitrator, third party. Never had to bring that person in once. We were always able to work to put decisions to a compromise, and one person kind of giving ground and accepting what the other person wanted to do, and just kind of going for it. So that was always a really cool dynamic, but having that third person helped a lot. But as a solo founder, I just blew up the phones of anybody who I knew who'd been an entrepreneur, who I'd had conversations with. And that was really great about going through the Clemson program as well, as I got exposed to a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the Greenville area. So I had a lot of people that were solo founders and co-founders that I could, reach out to, Marty obviously being one, just to get feedback from and think, hey, here's what I'm thinking, and go from there.
So let's talk about the challenges of growing. It's always fun. It's always exciting, but it also brings a whole set of challenges, people, process, profits. Again, as you're growing, what were some of the bigger challenges you guys faced as you were in that growth phase, and how maybe did you handle them?
First and foremost, hindsight being 2020, we were just wide open in terms of revenue and sales and growth. And, we had, luckily, I had done a lot of the things I was doing at Tested HQ previously in a corporate setting. Like I had done field testing and product development research and stuff like that, but never as like an independent third party. So just figuring out what our services we offered were. I mean, that was a challenge simply because it's easy when you're doing research and when also you were in charge of decision making, which I was previously, to kind of push independent research too far and be like, no, this is what you should do. Because you're just like, customer, why can't you figure this out? The data is so clear. But that wasn't my job. Our job was to be an independent third party, give them the data. So just figuring out like kind of what the services are and what we deliver and how it impacts the product development process. But I would say this, understanding your product is one thing, understanding how to sell your product is another thing. That's what people don't realize, because for us, our biggest challenge in terms of sales was we were so used to, or all the clients we were working with were so used to just trying to do this themselves. I mean, you have both like the two big players in the industry, both TTI and Stanley Black & Decker. They have hundreds of product managers, and product managers' jobs and their job description is you are the user advocate. You are supposed to be the person representing the end user through the product development process. But you're also in charge of margin. You're also in charge of timeline. You're also in charge of NER delays and the marketing and all these other things. So going out and actually talking to end users becomes such a neglected part of your job. And so with Tested HQ, we had to not only show them the value of going with a third party to do this work, but also almost tell them like, hey, your team's not doing as good as they could, basically. So it was an education as well as a kind of calling them out for the opportunities while also trying to make money and sell a service. So there was just so many complex pieces of the sales process, and then just also networking and meeting new clients, going to trade shows and things like that. So, I mean, those are the challenges. And then the last challenge, I think it was just one of the big things is we just tried to bite off more than we saw so many opportunities, and we try to develop a service for all of them instead of just focusing in on one part of the product development process, which that was something that we had to continue to parse down as we grew as a company, because we found ourselves trying to solve too many problems instead of just solving the core problem which we started to solve.
Yeah, by design, we do something we call relentless execution framework, and it's 90-day sprints, and you're only allowed to pick 2 or 3 big things that we're going to chase or try to attack over those 90 days. Because one thing we see is just that, right? You're starting, there's so many opportunities, there's so many problems, there's so many things to fix. Well, I want to do this, but I want to do this, but we need to do that. We need to put this in place, and you just can't do it. I mean, you have 12 people, limited time, limited resources. There's no way you can get to it all. But I do want to talk about, because that's just the job. You're selling, you're trying to keep people's mouths fed, right? You're trying to pay salaries, but you still have to develop a company. You have to develop a culture. You have to develop, almost the intangibles of Tested HQ while also hitting numbers, and maybe talk to me about how you balance that. How do you set a culture? How do you build a culture when you're you're grinding, you're flying around, you're trying to sign new customers, you're hiring folks, but you have to onboard them and make sure they're, just explain all that, how that worked. And
culture was a big sticking point for me, and something that I spent a lot of time on, arguably too much time on, simply because I had come from very kind of just cutthroat, sink or swim, just trial by fire corporate culture. I mean, that's and I'm incredibly thankful for that. I mean, the lot of the work ethic I have is not just a result of, the wonderful parenting from my parents, but also the fact that I was put into a very high pressure environment, and I learned how to succeed in that environment. And I think that's incredibly beneficial. And the younger you can have that experience, the better, for not only if you ever want to build your own company, but also just understanding how you work the most effectively and just what your strategies are for your own personal sense. But so culture was one thing that we focused on, because we learned a lot working in the corporate world that we wanted to change and not have at our company. And so, even when we started hiring our first employees, the best compliment we ever got, I mean, the first person we hired, actually, funny enough, was a part-time software development PhD student, either master's or PhD student from Clemson. And we didn't know anything about software. We didn't know what we were doing. Austin and I are both not afraid to admit that we're non-technical. We're non-technical founders. Neither of us know how to code. So we needed help building basic things like the website and setting up, CRM and stuff like that. So we had this wonderful student named Mugda who helped us. And she was only with us for probably 6 months before she graduated, and then got offered a real job that, we couldn't offer her that much money. But the best part about it is we got the best compliment we ever got. She's like, I'll say this. She's like, I know you guys are a small company. It's just two of you. She's like, but the culture here is great. Like you guys, I felt very respected. I felt very heard. And I don't know to say what we did, but we just tried to just, listen and try to, and I will say one thing I learned in getting up to 12 people is I took that too far. There's a certain point where you have to be a decision maker and you have to move the company forward as a leader. And I wanted too much of a collaborative environment. And that's something I learned in having a big company, that not everybody wants to have a say in the decisions. There's multiple different types of employees in the process and people on your team who need to be involved and who don't want to be involved. And some people who just want to do their job and clock out at the end of the day and that's it. And balancing all of that into a culture was a unique challenge in figuring out a way. And I don't know if I've really completely still figured it out. It's still a work in progress throughout the process, but culture was something I wanted people to feel heard. I wanted people to feel included. And most importantly, I wanted people to feel informed. That was my biggest frustration in corporate America is I felt so down so many layers in terms of the decision making that I didn't understand why we were pursuing it. Or when I was told hey, you need to add this feature or take away this feature on this product, or you need to hit this margin on your product. There was never a why. In my whole life, ever since being a kid, I've been the most annoying person asking why every single time. I want to explain, I want to learn every process. And so I wanted my team to feel comfortable asking me why, and just me being able to explain that.
Yeah, in full transparency or full disclosure, I don't know if it was around this time. I know I came in and did a little bit of project work with you on the DISC and Working Genius for you and your team. Maybe talk about, did that help? What'd you find? Because you weren't doing assessments prior to that, I don't believe. And then maybe walk me through, once we did that, what did you learn from that? What did you take away from that sort of stuff? And, do you recommend we highly recommend it, obviously, but would you recommend it to people that are out there growing, starting a company to, hey, do these assessments or do some sort of assessments for their people?
First, I nerded out over the stuff that you showed because psychology major. So, DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs, personality test, I lived all of that in school. So I love psychology. I actually went to school originally to be a political science major because I thought I wanted to be a politician, which thank Jesus I didn't do that.
We're not going into that.
No, we don't need to go into that. So I switched my major after 2 years because I was I can't do this, to psychology, because I genuinely was interested and I wanted to graduate in 4 years. So I was really interested, but the biggest thing learned from the testing is I really wish we would have it implemented sooner. Especially when you're a startup, your first hires are so crucial, to, I will say this, and some people might disagree, and you might have some founders who are willing to be workaholics and things like that. But I find when you start scaling and start growing in terms of people, finding where you need a lot of things. You need people who are willing to be jack of all trades, but you also need people who are really focused in certain roles. And our hiring process was more just a feel and a gut and your typical interview process. And we just didn't do a good job of defining the roles that we were hiring for, one. Two, because to be fair, we didn't know what we needed. And that was both a blessing and a curse. Some of the people we hired and some people who work for us still today were that jack of all trades where we can plug them in anywhere and they're going to succeed with very little direction. They don't need it. They'll just, you point them in a direction and they'll just get it done. And if they finish that, they'll find a new place to help as well. But at the same time, there's also certain positions where you need it to be a very defined role and you need to be a very defined person. And not testing and trying to understand how that person, because for me, it's less about, it is about succeeding in the role. I want them to contribute to the company, but I also want them to feel empowered and feel motivated to do the work they're doing. One of the best pieces of advice I got from one of my professors, Joe Gibson, who's still a mentor and friend and advisor today, when going through the MBA process, we had lunch one day and we were talking about, first employees. I think it was towards the end, so I was starting to think about actually building a company. And he said, you have to remember when you're an employer, not everybody's going to share your passion and your vision. It's not everybody's baby. For me, Test HQ was my baby. I wanted to work. I spent weekends thinking about it. I spent nights thinking about it. I worked late. I got up early and, just was going after it. Joe told me, he's you're going to have people like that. You're going to have people who buy into the vision and want to, lock in. But he said, you're also going to have people who just are there to get a paycheck, work a 9-to-5 job, and, you know, go home at the end of the day, crack a beer open and watch football in their armchair like that. But you need those people. Like, you need those people. You need those people to succeed at your company as well. And I just never thought of it that way. It's so easy when you're a founder, especially a young founder, and you're flooded with Instagram and LinkedIn. Like, once Instagram picks up that you're an entrepreneur and a founder, oh my gosh, like Alex Hormozy and oh my gosh, Tony, why can't I remember him? Legendary like motivational speaker.
Robbins?
Yeah, Tony Robbins. Like, you're just just absolutely, you got to do this as a founder, you got to do this, and like you just suck it all up because you want to be an entrepreneur so bad. But like all that information, you think that everybody's just locked in and like wants to go get your dream, and that's what you have to hire and that's what you have to find. And it's just not the reality. Like, you need people to excel at what you bring them to excel for. And we didn't do a job. We didn't do any testing leading up to it. And that was kind of like the biggest, we hit a moment where, like, you know, there was a, you know, this is 2023, economy was starting to turn a little bit. And like, we sat back and we realized, like, we have a lot of employees, like, we just don't even know what they're doing. Like, and I don't think they know what they're doing because we just didn't train them well. We didn't put them in the right position. Like, for example, we had a situation, especially after we did the testing, where, you know, one of our key, you know, services or key things was going out in the field and talking to contractors and getting feedback from contractors on tools. And we hired a guy who was not the kind of person who like to leave his house and go talk to contractors and go meet new contractors and like put in stuff. That's an outgoing sales role. Like, that's
you need a G. You need a G.
You need a G. You need a high I. Like, you need a little bit of, you know, you need a, like the Marty profile. You need a D and an I for that, right? Like, you need a high D, you know? And, he wasn't that. Like, he was the S and C on the DISC profile. And so, like, we kept saying, like, Forrest, we need you to go out there. We need you to go talk to contractors. And it didn't help that he lived in, like, rural Missouri as well. So it's not like Greenville where you can just, like, you know, walk out your door and almost get hit by a contractor's truck somewhere. And, like, we didn't think about this thing. We just thought, hey, he interviewed really well. He works really hard. Like, we were impressed by, like, the homework he did. But like, I failed to put him in a position to succeed, and it just didn't work out, which was super frustrating because we needed that discipline within the company, but we did not put the right position to succeed. And don't get me wrong, even without testing, we did get lucky a couple of times. Like, you know, there's sometimes I feel like where you have a role where it's very clear, like it's very, very clear, like this person will succeed in this role, and testing might not be as much, but even testing that person, understand, okay, how can I help them further succeed? Working Genius and DISC completely changed the way I thought about, from you guys, working with you and having you present to the team, how I thought about organizing the team, working with the team, and just collaborating as a team, and also setting up each team member for success in their role.
Yeah. And I just want to note, because you just said something that I don't think a lot of people say. You said, I didn't put them in the right position to succeed, which I love, because that's 100% true. Most people will say, well, they didn't work hard enough. They didn't care. Bad hire. No. Like, that person's a good person. We just didn't know their skills and their geniuses to leverage it and use it properly. Yeah. There might have been a role where that profile would have been awesome, but but when you misplace them, they're struggling and they're trying. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to go suck at my job today.
Yes,
nobody.
Exactly.
Everyone wants to move up and to the right and get better and get more money and all that stuff. But we have to help them. We have to say, okay, what are your natural skills? What are you great at? What do you love doing? Sweet, we have a role for you. But it also might be, we don't have a role for you and we put you in the wrong spot. So, hey, we're going to help you find a role. Or, you know, everyone always thinks it's bad if you tell somebody, hey, you're not a fit, or this profile. Most of the times they're going, I know, I hate my job because I don't know why. I'm frustrated. So I love that you just said, I didn't put them in the right spot to succeed. I don't think that's a common thought from founders, bosses, leaders. I tend to see they usually blame the employee and don't take any accountability. So
one of my favorite quotes, going back to your, you know, everybody, like I said, no one wakes up in the morning and wants to fail. No one wants to wake up in the morning and feel like they're not contributing, right? That's just not how humans are. Like, that's just doesn't make sense. So one of my favorite quotes I've ever read, I have no idea where I read it from. I'm sure I could Google it and find out pretty quickly, but never attribute what you think is malice when it's most likely just ignorance. Yeah. Like, it's one of those things where if you're not putting people in the right position to succeed, and this is kind of, man, talking to you and being friends with you and just learning from everything, the knowledge you have with people, and just also like being obsessed with purpose, like I am in a lot of ways, sometimes unhealthily obsessed with purpose, thinking way too much about the purpose of my life. But like I do believe that a lot of people's unhappiness in their job and like where they are in life is because they're just not either putting themselves in the right position to succeed, or they don't have an understanding enough, or the people they work for don't have an understanding enough of where they would be the most successful. And that's something I've seen, because I agree with you. Like, especially people who make the choice to go work in a high pressure corporate environment, or even more of a high pressure founding startup environment. A lot of times they want to be there, but if you don't put them in the right spot, like they're not able to connect the dots. And usually, I'm not even saying usually, almost always, it's just a matter of them being not in the right role, in the right position, versus, I mean, another really good example is we had someone who worked for us, her name was Terry, and like, she was great. Like, she is the most introverted, quiet person I've ever met in my life. Like, she is just so quiet and introverted. And, you know, it's hilarious because she stepped away for a little bit to, you know, potentially go work somewhere else. And she interviewed so poorly at so many other companies. And Austin and I would always talk about, like, so many people are just sleeping on Terry because she is a absolute tank, just workhorse. Like, she will get things done in an hour that you thought would take her 2 days. Like, she is just an absolute and she's relentless about it too. And she's also a mom, and she like is not afraid to hold you accountable to not doing things. Like, she was like the Test HQ mom in a sense, would just like break it, to come down on people if things weren't getting done like she wanted them to be done. But you would never know that interviewing her. Like, you would never know that interviewing her, because she does not interview well. She is very not confident when it comes to talking to people. But you put her in a role where she succeeds, and she is off to the races.
So it sounds like a low I with a tenacity genius. So yeah, just turn her loose on
I would
work,
love,
and
we should look at her
crank it
disc
out.
profile again, because I mean, her S and C, I remember, were off the charts. I mean, they were both 100%, and her I and D were just down.
And again, that goes back to two things. One, as a candidate or just a person, self-awareness isn't that common. We all think we know ourselves, but we don't. So taking these things, because it never fails. We'll go into a company, we give them these, and we always have a few. That's not me. It's completely wrong. And it's like, is it? Like, I bet you if you went and asked some people, they're going to say that nailed you. And then their coworkers are almost always, oh, bull, that's definitely you. And remember when you did that?
Yeah.
So it's important for the candidates to know that. Then a Terry can walk into that interview and say, hey, yeah, I'm a little lower on my eyes, so I may not nail this, but here's why you should hire me anyways. 100%. Look at my T, blah, 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 blah. As an organization, that's why these tests are so important. You know, before I'd bring Terry in, I would have already known, all right, she's a low I. She's not going to blow us away with her conversation and stuff, but she's a T, and look what this role needs. It's just a constant tier. Yeah. So who cares? Like, I don't care if she doesn't blow us away with her conversation. So that's, again, why I just think everyone needs to be using some sort of assessments. Again, we push DISC and Working Genius, but I don't care what you use something.
But doing it before like you said, using it, like, for me as an interview, because even before Tested HQ, like, I work in corporate America, like, I never had many direct reports, but I did have, I sat in on many, many interviews and interviewed many people for roles within our team or something like that. And as an interviewer, I tell my wife this all the time, because she hates interviews when whenever she was interviewing.
Everyone hates jobs. Both sides.
I love them.
I do too.
I am an enigma in that. Even being on the candidate side, I love them, because I see it just as a conversation. Like, hey, I'm getting to know you as the company, and you're getting to know me as the candidate, and like, let's just have a conversation. I don't need It's funny. I go back. My sister was having a hard time looking for jobs. Like, at one point, was just not struggling with the interviews, so she went to like an interview coach, right? And he gave her this folder of like, you know, here's like all these answers you should memorize, and like these questions you should memorize.
The worst advice I've ever heard.
Exactly right. I saw the folder, and I told her, I was like, "There's your problem. Like stop trying to guess what they're going to talk about. It just it's more important for me, you know, in an interview as an interviewer, to like know that you're authentically answering my questions and thinking about my questions, rather than like coming up with like some pre-planned script, right? Because in reality, when you're in the corporate world, when you're in a high pressure environment, you are going to have to think on your feet. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have a script of this is what we do in this situation. You're going to have to be able to go on the fly. That's just how it goes. And for me as an interviewer, like, the most frustrating part sometimes of interviewing people, especially in corporate America, was I didn't know these people other than their resume. Like I just had a resume and that was it. I didn't even have a cover letter most of the time. And like then I get in there and so I don't know what questions to ask. Like, I have to we do group interviews, which I always felt bad for the candidate because it'd be like 5 of us product managers and one of them, and like we're just gonna let you
feel like
up.
it's hostage negotiation.
Yeah, I mean it's you all worked and to earn your stripes, so you want to make sure that person can handle it as well, right? And obviously that person, you don't want a person to bring the team down, and just having that data, both for the candidate knowing what their profile is and you as the interviewer knowing what their profile, it just creates such a more authentic conversation because then you can really dive into, here's a job, here's the strengths we can see the most succeed, here's the weaknesses. Because that's the thing is like with product management, which is what, I did in the corporate world and which is, what I still like love doing. I mean, corporate product management, like you are involved in every part, especially like at large companies like TTI, Stanley Black & Decker. You are the person making the decisions. Like they are your products that you are the charge of. You work with engineers, you work with marketing people, you work with sales, you work with supply chain, but ultimately everything comes up to you. You are the decision maker because you have to be that end user representative in a sense. So you're supposed to be that third party separate from engineering and marketing and design to make the decision that's best for the customer, right? And that doesn't have to be someone like me. You don't have to be high I or high D, like, which is, super outgoing and super talkative, super friendly. Some of the best product managers are super introverted because they just really study the decisions they made that. Like, you can succeed in different ways, but it's important to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are going into that interview rather than, someone taking a risk on hiring you and you sink or swim, right?
And, I always say big companies, if they have a bad hire, they're like a cruise ship. If that person starts jumping up and down, going crazy on a cruise ship, the other passengers don't feel it, don't notice it. A startup is a canoe. And if you have somebody jumping up and down in a canoe, everyone's going to feel it. And they have the potential to tip over your boat and the entire boat. One bad hire. So anyway, I could talk about the hiring process in corporate America and panel. So, we've been going for quite a while. I kind of just want to wrap this up, Michael, with if you could go back to 2020, Tested HQ is still your side hustle, but you're going to launch it. Would you do anything different? What would you change? What did you learn that maybe you could go back and say, okay, if I had a redo, this is what I would redo?
It's tough because I intrinsically, as a life philosophy, don't believe in regrets. But
not regrets.
I got you. But first, I would definitely have spent more time on organization and processes. That's one thing that we were so busy so quickly. We hit that nerve pain point so quickly in the industry, more so than I was even expecting. I knew it was out there. I mean, obviously the company that hired us initially, like there was opportunities, there was business there. But then, we go to trade shows and we talk to these product managers who are usually like very like, boisterous and like, oh, I don't need help. Like I can do this myself. But then you talk to them, they're like, no, like, dude, that's awesome what you're doing. Like we really need that. I was like, oh shoot, this is bigger than I thought. So I got so locked into just selling and trade shows and just really bringing in business that, setting up processes and even just setting up our services to be clearly defined and understandable by the customer so that someone who came to our website understood what we do and, the advantages we provide and the competitive edge we would give them is just not something we spent a lot of time doing. Marketing as well. Marketing is one that we were so reliant early on, which I think a lot of founders are, on my network and my reputation in the industry, which was great. But eventually that runs out. Eventually you have to start going beyond that. So that transition between selling to my network and having to do more enterprise marketing is not something we spent time thinking about until it was time to start thinking about it, right? And there was a lag time there. But then also just setting up, going back to, I'm going to drive the nail on its head, the people thing. Like I never thought about the hiring process as a founder, but you're right. Like your first 3-4 hires are just so crucial. And like I said, I will proudly say 4 of them were like knocked out of the park. Like and to be fair, I knew those people really well though, except for Terry. Terry was a shot in the dark that turned out to be an amazing shot in the dark. But like a couple other people we hired, like Austin either knew really well, and one of the guys we hired who is still like, still helps us today. Like I knew really, really well, and I felt really comfortable with bringing him on. So, but just setting up a process for people and just having processes to fall back on, because that's the thing is, it's not even having the process that is why I wish we would have spent more time thinking about it. It's just having something that was like documented that we could go back to and ideate on, basically. Like, not every time we thought of something having to like start anew, like, oh, let's think about this, but just knowing that we ideate it. Hey, here's what we think our hiring process should be. Even if you just did a template, like just having something to build off of is crucial, because, you know, one thing that happened quickly was originally when Austin and I started the business, we spent one day a week thinking about the future. Literally, I made sure one day a week we lock ourselves in my office with, I have an entire wall that's painted with whiteboard paint, so I can just literally like be like a toddler and write on my walls. And we would just think about the future, like future of tech, future of our processes, future of our services. Like, I mean, blue ocean, like way out there, because it was a nice little respite for us from just like the day-to-day of selling and executing and stuff like that. But when we got busy and things, we got away from that. We stopped thinking about the future. We only were focused on day to day. And it wasn't until, gosh, man, almost 5 years later that I realized, like, we got away from that. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, man, like I'm getting burned out on this stuff because I'm not spending enough time. And this is from a personal standpoint. My biggest weakness, I love this. You go back to interview questions, right?
No weaknesses.
Yeah, no weaknesses. But if you ever get that question, well, I always tell my wife, like, turn that weakness into a strength, me to turn into a positive. And so what I always tell people is my biggest weakness, if I'm going to say that, is I tend to put too much on my plate because I want to get it all done. But the strength is that it shows I'm, you know, very, very motivated to succeed and very, you know, willing to just succeed at all costs. But it's true. Like, I will put a ton on my plate and think I can get it all done in a day. And I'm just like, what was I thinking at the end of the day? I couldn't do this. But with that, and so just one thing I'll say this as a founder, and this is my advice for every single founder, is figure out the best way you work first. Because if you can figure out the best way you work, it's going to make you healthy, happier, and just a more clear-headed founder when you actually start bringing on people. Because I did not know, I took no time off between leaving my corporate job on Friday and starting Tested HQ on a Monday. So I took no time to be like, oh, I don't have an office anymore. I'm now breaking my routine. I am working from my home office now. I've never done that before. All these things, those are all important. Like, you have to think about that, because if you're not in a good headspace and you're not happy with your routine, and routines are always going to be something that changes and you work on over time, but have some things set in stone, some kind of stabilizing events that you do. Because if you're trying to figure out how to make yourself happy while also trying to figure out how to make your employees happy and feel valued, and then also your wife or whatever else is happening around you, it's going to be too much. And you're going to get burned out just from everything in life. And that definitely happened to me. So, yeah.
Good stuff, Michael. And a shameless plug. It sounds like what you're telling people is be intentional, do stuff by design, don't leave it to chance.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
That's kind of why we started this, right? We see a lot of that. I think that's the default mode, is just, hey, we'll figure it out. Yeah. And most people do, right? You're good problem solvers.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And before you know it, though, it's just kind of
there's too many things to figure out.
Too many things to figure out, and it starts to collapse on itself. But anyways, good stuff. I love what you shared with us today. Thank you for sharing your journeys, your challenges. It's not always fun to come on here and not brag about all the great stuff, but you know, we tend to, hey, what are the challenges? Because you're not alone in these challenges.
Yeah.
They're the people. It's always people, profits, and processes, I feel, are the challenges. So we love to talk about it, because people out there are probably sitting there going, yeah, I'm facing the same problem. Glad I'm not alone. So,
for sure.
Anyways, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Is there anything you want to plug or anything you want to talk about?
No, thanks for having me. I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I've learned a lot in this journey. And that's the other thing I'll say, is always be learning. Like, no matter how successful, if you're Elon Musk and the richest man in the world and have super successful startups, or you're just starting out, always be learning and network. Like Dale, Marty, all the people at Next and Clemson, all these people that kind of have been shepherds to my SCRA, to my journey along the way. Like, when I had questions, thankfully I had someone to call. And that's my biggest advice to people, is surround yourself with a network, put yourself out there, be vulnerable with people, so that when you have challenges, you're not trying to go through it alone, because you're going to feel really alone. And most of the time, it's going to be too big of a mountain to climb by yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael. Until next time, everybody. Thanks.